Erin, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. Taking time out of your weekend is when we're recording this together. So I appreciate that and telling us a little bit about your campaign and yourself. So let's start there. Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us why you decided to run for school board this year.
Well, I appreciate you inviting me on. I think this is an excellent idea. Well, I started researching education probably about 10 years ago. And what I found, I was a teacher and, I heard this stuff about what was going on with Common Core. And so I did some research into it. What had happened is under Bush, there was No Child Left Behind. And by 2014, the goal was that 100% of the children had to pass that test. That's mathematically impossible. And so the superintendents were going, wait, foul, we can't do that. So under about 2014, the administration that was in control at that time said, well, if you don't have to do that, if you accept these standards sight unseen. So they went ahead and accepted the standards. Now, supposedly Texas did not, and I think Alaska and Virginia, and I can't remember the two other states, but we took the waiver, and that means that we did not have to take 100% of our students didn't have to pass. So we took the waiver, and we actually passed a law that stated that we couldn't teach Common Core, but we got around that. We call our standards college and career based. And so what happened was, Common Core came in, and it's not called that here, but the computers came in. And I always say education is a relationship between the student and the teacher. A computer does not take the place of a good teacher. And what has happened is everything is on the computer, and we're not teaching the basics like, phonics, grammar. Phonics is to reading as grammar is to writing. And the last thing is, our math, the way that the math, when the Common Core standards came out, there was a gentleman at Stanford, and I'm having a blackout of what his name was. He refused to sign off on them. And the woman that was in charge she was out of Arkansas, she would not sign off on the English standards. But they went ahead and did them anyway. And Milgram, that was his name, the math. He came to the State Board of Education probably about 5 years ago and testified and said that our standards were worse than Common Core, our math standards. There's a gentleman, I think he's out of Liberty, Texas. His name is Randy Houchins. He's gone to the State Board of Education on a number of occasions to testify about how the math standards are not good. He's an engineer, and he said a lot of the tests on the STAR test were what he called process standards, how you get your answer. And what he said is that he's an engineer. Nobody's ever asked him how he got his answer, just that it was correct. And he would always end with, and if you don't get it correct, people could die, because he made bridges. So it's important that they get the right answer. What I was noticing, because I'm a tutor, is in the younger grades in math, they're drawing all these lines. And I go, what are you doing? I'm trying to figure out what 20 times 32 is. Well, teaching them the old way, they would get loose count as to where they were. Oh, I already counted that one. So it wasn't working. We need to stick to what works. And the other thing is in the reading, they come to a word they don't know, and they look at me and they say, I don't know that word. And they have no skill. They have no tool to figure out what that word is. And I help them do that through phonics. Those are the things that I noticed when I was starting to research, and it concerned me because, our kids are not getting a full education, and our teachers are being devalued and not utilized correctly. There's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Huff, and he wrote a book about the testing in Texas. He's over in Tomball, and he went and visited some legislators, and he said, the legislators told him, well, how will we know if they can't read? And I automatically thought, the teacher will know. When I was a teacher, I could tell you who needed help in phonics, who needed help in comprehension. We're not trusting our teachers. Our teachers know what they're doing. The ones that went to school and learned, it's a calling. They know what they're doing, and they're not being able to do that to the best of their ability. And we have a lot of teachers that are leaving. They're leaving because a lot of our seasoned teachers are leaving because of the way that education has become. And then our new teachers are leaving because of the behaviors that are in the classroom. And those need to be addressed. I know on your Facebook page, Humble ISD Parents, some parents have voiced some concerns about the bullying. When it gets to the point where they're being hospitalized or they're having to have their jaw wired tight, and I heard this from a teacher the other day, it's gotten too far. And we need to do something about that. We need to set some, the most loving thing you can do for anyone, especially a child, is number one, tell them the truth. And number two, when they're doing something wrong, teach them the right way. Because if you don't, they will go out of school and they will continue acting the way they do, and they'll get in worse trouble. So I think we're doing a disservice to those victims that are being victimized by bullying, and also for the ones that are doing the bullying. Why is it going that far? It needs to be stopped. So that's why I'm in the race.
One thing is clear is you're pretty passionate about some of the issues that you're running on. I don't want to skip the opportunity for people to hear a little bit about you. You mentioned you're a tutor. It sounded like you've got some teaching experience. Tell us a little bit about you and what kind of experience and skill set you would potentially be bringing to the board if you were elected.
Well, I'm a teacher, so I know what teachers go through. I think, they're the boots on the ground, as you say. I also am a mother. I have a 16-year-old daughter. She was in Green Tree Elementary, and I have had her in schools in the neighborhood. I think that, I fight for kids, and I will fight for the kids. I will ask questions. I will, the testing. I know it's a booger of a test, and I think it's an unfair test. I agree with Dr. Fagan with what she says about the test, because I've studied it. I agree with that. But the reality is there's a bill, HB 1842, that if there is a campus that is 5 years at improvement required, the state can come in and take over. Now, Waco, about 5 years ago, they used SB 1822, which came out of the Senate, and that means that you can partner with a charter school. And charter schools do not do better than public schools, despite what people want to say. I think public schools are getting a bad rap, but I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But I think we need to have a plan in place. We can't just pretend that's not happening. These are facts that I just told you. That we need, they also mentioned I remember sitting in a board meeting, and they said 38% are college and career ready and military ready. What about the other 62%? We're not doing justice by our children, and we need to address those things. And I don't want to attack anybody on the board, but at least work with us, or at least tell us what you're doing to improve those scores. So. But that's me.
Let's go back to some of the issues you mentioned in your opening there. You started off, you talked a little bit about concerns you have around the prevalence of computers being used in education or computer-based education. And I noticed on your website, and I've heard you talk in the forum, going back to that classical education, you've made several references to it being what the founding fathers were educated. That's how they were educated. Expound on that a little bit. What concerns do you have about computers being so prevalent in education, and what maybe should it look like if it were up to you?
Well, and I'm not totally against computers. When kids get to be about middle school or high school, computers are excellent for a research paper. What I'm not for is it hasn't worked. Our scores have plummeted because they're on the computer. Now, there was I believe a senator that said that they were going to write a bill that, and I don't remember her name. She said that they were going to write a bill to keep kids off the computer until 3rd grade. I would say until probably middle school. I just think that the teachers know what the kids need, and they need to be teaching them. Not, education is about relationship. It hasn't worked. We have a program which is in most of the state of Texas called iStation. It does not teach them how to read. A teacher teaches them how to read. And that's what we need to focus on, is more of the interaction between people, not interaction between a computer and the student. It also is, there's a lot of data collection. when they go on the computer. They're collecting data on the students. You know, there's a lot of surveys that come out. I don't know if you're aware of HB 123, where they can now teach character traits, things like your morals, justice, things that are soft skills is what Mike Morath called them. Those are subjective. You can't, but now that they're a law and they're in the TEKS now, they can test them. So it's on the STAR test. How do they test that? And now that the STAR test is on the computer from 3rd grade all the way up to 12th grade, you can adapt those questions. They can ask the same question over and over again until you answer it the way they want you to. So that's the danger of computers. Computers are not bad, but when you use them in a way that is not good for students, that's when I have a problem.
So you mentioned a couple times in your answer there, really focusing on that relationship between the teacher and the student. And I saw on your website that you mentioned that being a voice for the teachers, and that you feel that maybe sometimes teachers don't have that freedom to teach in creative, different ways. Tell me a little bit about that. What are your thoughts in that area as far as what teachers maybe don't have that freedom to do right now?
Well, there's legislators that are in Austin that are passing laws, and they've never been in a classroom before in their life. And the teachers are having to have to follow the law. And I was talking to a teacher the other day about how they're afraid to speak out about anything because they don't want to lose their job. So that's pretty muzzled to me if you're afraid to speak out about what is going on. And teachers love their students and care about them. I mean, I was a teacher. I was telling this teacher the other day, I can count on one hand how many bad teachers I've come across. It's just a lot of good teachers out there, and we're losing them because they're not being listened to.
I want to pivot a little bit to a different topic for a moment. There's a few candidates, maybe yourself, we'll find out here, I guess, in a moment, but there's a few candidates and there's a segment of the community that has expressed some concern around materials, books, things in Humble ISD libraries that they don't feel are appropriate or maybe even harmful. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that topic, since it's coming up quite a bit in conversations around the election.
Well, my question is I always ask, what educational value does the book have to be in the library? I think there's a lot of books that are questionable. They have very detailed scenes about sexual encounters between two people. I don't think those need to be in the library. And we need to find, if you have an educational value to it, then that's fine, but I'm just not seeing it. And I think that they need to be taken out of the library. They're also in the public library, so they can go there. They also say that we're a very diverse community. Sex is, everybody has it, but it's not, that's not what I think of diversity. For instance, I used to study to be a deaf interpreter. And in the deaf culture, being very honest and being very open, asking someone my age, like a woman in their 50s, it's not rude in the deaf culture. I find that very fascinating. I find it fascinating in the Hispanic culture. They respect their mothers. I mean, they have Mother's Day and they just respect, they value the family. I love that about them. But I don't know about, the sexual orientation, if that's really all that important. It's more, to me, I think of diversity as it's a cultural thing. And that doesn't have anything to do with sex, if that makes sense.
I just want to make sure I understand you. So it sounded like you said you wanted to, if those books are in the libraries, they need to be taken out of there. Now, the district has said in meetings that they have a process for that. Do we feel good with the process, or you not feel that that's maybe the best course of action, what we're doing already?
I think it's a rather long process. So I think finding a better process that doesn't take quite so long, I think would be better. Some of these books I've read and I've seen them, and it's I get kind of uncomfortable the way that it's being read, or written. So I would say that when they have a question about it, that it be pulled from the at least the shelves until a decision has been made. I think the process needs to be a little quicker than it is.
All right, let's pivot one more time. Let's talk a little bit about safety, school safety. That's on the minds of a lot of parents right now. Like I've mentioned to others, it's unfortunately been in the news very recently. So let's talk about it. Two pieces of it. One, kind of internal stuff, bullying, fighting within the schools. You mentioned that earlier, and then we can talk a little bit about external threats, right? Active shooters. So, what are your thoughts on how the district is doing already? What improvements would you like to see, if any, in this area?
Well, and I've heard from teachers that they're not doing very well with the bullying process. If it's gotten so far that someone is hurt physically, it's gotten beyond that. We need to have a process, like step one, okay, if you bully, you have an in-school suspension. Then if that doesn't work, it's an alternative school. And I'm going to say this, if it is bad to where they are physical with people, I would say they need to be expelled. And we would offer them, this is where you can go and get your alternative, your GED. That would be a just the last resort. But I'm telling you, when I heard some of the things that I heard yesterday, no, it is not okay what is going on in those school buildings and beating someone to the point that they have to go to the hospital. It has gotten too far beyond that. And I think we need to give the teachers and the administrators more leeway as to to come up with a plan, because every school is different. Every school, it has a different climate, but allowing them to come up with a plan and not worry about whether they're going to get in trouble with the superintendent or with the school board about what they've come up with. Possibly coming up with a plan about that and sending it to the superintendent and they decide. What I have heard is that a lot of times they're not supported. So I think there needs to be more done. And I think coming up with a plan that is very stringent, because like I said, if you do not stop them, they will keep going until it gets to a point where someone is going to get hurt. And some people have already gotten hurt. So and I know I sound urgent about it, but I think that's urgent. When someone has to have their jaw, locked tight and goes to the hospital, that should never get that far. It shouldn't be that way. They shouldn't be afraid to go to school. And I know that Dr. Spivey, I think if I'm saying his name wrong, I'm sorry. He talked a little bit about bullying, about how it starts on the phone. I think a lot of it, girls bully different than boys, and girls can be they do it with words, and they can be just as cruel. Trying to find, a way to stop that is something that I would want to make a priority when I become a school board member, because it just breaks my heart finding out about that.
Now let's talk a little bit about those external threats, right? Those things that we hear about in the news, unfortunately. We've heard all different kinds of potential solutions. We've heard about arming teachers. We've heard about metal detectors. The district has put out these ballistic shields. What are your thoughts on the best course of action in this area? How do you feel the district is doing already? I'd love to just kind of hear your thoughts in this area.
Thank goodness that it has not happened on Humble campus. We don't want the school to look like a prison. We want to make it welcoming, but I do know that you have to check in. I am for those that are willing and want to. I don't see anything wrong with someone with teachers being armed. Most of the time, people that I know that grew up with guns, they know how to treat guns. My husband, he was in the Army, and he always used to tell me, Erin, you never take your gun out unless you have intentions of using it. So, it's not going to be like the Wild West and they're going to be having their guns out doing that. And it's voluntary. If a teacher is not comfortable with a gun, they don't have to take the training to do it. But I do think that the thing about, they say that on the elementary campuses, they don't have a police officer, but they can get there in 3 minutes. By that time, it's probably already done and over with. So you need to have a plan before that. And I think arming teachers, or not necessarily teachers, whoever is, you'd have to do background checks, make sure they're okay and all that kind of stuff. And then come up with a plan. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think the Guardian plan was mentioned by one of the people that is running, which we do not have a strong male presence at the elementary schools. And I think having fathers there would really, even at the middle school and high school, it detours, the more people you have watching them, the more they're going to go, oh, well, I guess I can't get away with that today. So I'm just going to move on. I think the more help we have, the better. And I'm open to all those things. If someone has a different plan, I'm willing to listen to it. But I think that we need to come up with a plan because it seems to be prevalent right now. So, and usually sometimes now, I know in this last incident, I think in North Carolina, it was someone who used to go to school there, I think. But, like in Columbine and some of the other ones, they were actual students in there. So, and I think the one in Florida, there were indications that he was a problem before it all started. And it's, again, getting it before it actually happens, so that, coming up with a plan and actually giving them, getting a plan and giving them if they need to be reprimanded for something, then so be it. But I know that a lot of times they're aware of it. The faculty is aware that they're a problem and nothing is done. And so then this comes about. So I think there's several things going on. And I think that, I think having shields is not enough. You need to have, what if they come and, they come over and you've got a shield and then they just shoot you anyway. So I think there needs to be more than just a shield.
You've been a voice that I've seen. I watch every single board meeting, and I've seen you speak publicly, and I've even seen you when you weren't called on, make a video outside the board meeting and talking about how you weren't called on. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the culture right now of the school board and the community, how that relationship is. Does it need to be improved? And if so, how? Well,
when I first started going there, I had 3 minutes. And then all of a sudden it was down to 1 minute. No, and I agree with, I think one of the people said that, the board cannot talk to you. That's true. They do not have to comment on you. It's not on the agenda, so they don't have to ask you questions. That is not what we're talking about when we're saying we want more than a minute. Just having a minute, it does not give you a chance to really say what you want to say. You're trying to say it as quickly as possible because you only have a minute. Huffman, just across the way, has 5 minutes. I was like, oh my gosh, I have a friend that lives there, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'd die and go to heaven if I had 5 minutes. So it's not that we want them to fix the problem, but see, that's our First Amendment right, is free speech. If you take that away, the truth is the first thing that goes away. So when I get up there and I say that, what I'm saying, I usually put on my Facebook page to let the community know what's going on. I don't care if they say anything to me, but the community, that's one way that we let the community know this is what I have found out. So that is what's being taken away, is we're not able to express ourselves in a manner that is concise and makes sense because we're trying to get it in under a minute.
I do want to give you an opportunity. If there's anything that maybe I didn't ask about that you want to address, I want to give you an opportunity to do that. So are there any topics that I didn't ask about that you'd like to talk about before we get to the end of our time?
Well, I think a lot of people, I think in the 1980s, it used to be that the curriculum was local, and now it's gone to the state. And what happens is we have to, in order to get the federal money, we have to, our Education Commissioner, Michael Raff, he takes the TEKS. I don't know if he writes them. I think they have a board, people that do it. Then when it's finished, he takes those TEKS and he sends them to Cordona, who is the Education Secretary of the federal government. He is the one that says, okay, Nair, and then if he likes them, we get our federal dollars. So we actually have federal education, federal curriculum. Now, one of the things that I find concerning that I was listening to Mike Moraff, he has spent so much money, and the more money he spends, the more our test scores plummet, and our Texas children are suffering. What he had mentioned is that he wanted to start a state curriculum. That I am concerned about, because what Waco needs may not be what Humble needs. So we really need to start looking at what the state is doing and what Mike Morath is doing, because that's what they're following, is what the laws come out of Austin. And I think it really needs to come back to local. I'm not sure if as a school board member, I can do anything about it, but we certainly can get a group of people, go down to Austin and tell them we want our schools back. So I'm open to anything like that, but I really think I want people to know what is going on and the truth of what is going on in education.
Absolutely. Now, there's 4 people running for position 2, including yourself. And like you've probably heard me say, I appreciate anybody that's willing to put a ton of time and effort into running for what is a volunteer position. But again, 4 people running, 3 challenges, including yourself and the incumbent. What's the differentiator here? Why should people vote for Erin Greene versus the other 3 people running for this position?
I think I bring a vision that I can understand where teachers are coming from. I have great empathy towards people. I can understand where the teachers are coming from and understand what the students are going through. And I also, I do not dislike anybody on the board. I just want to work with them to make Humble ISD the best it can be and to help our kids be the best they can be. So that's why I think I would be a good candidate.
All right. So let's say somebody watches this or they listen to the podcast version. They like what they hear. They want to find out, how do I support her? How do I get a hold of her? How do they do that?
Okay. Well, I have a Facebook page. It's Erin Greene for Humble ISD. And then also I have I have Erin Greene for Humble ISD at gmail.com is my email address. And then I also have a web page, which is Erin Greene for Humble ISD.com. So those are 3 ways that you can get a hold of me. And I've enjoyed talking with you, and I hope y'all vote for me.
Very good. Well, again, thank you so much for your time and your generosity and being willing to sit down and chat with us for a little bit. Best of luck in the race, and I hope we get to talk again soon. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.